Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk with you guys a little bit about why you should never lift a weight slowly. And we're going to talk about both for athletes as well as for people who are just even training for hypertrophy. Now, I will get into some sport-specific stuff in a minute, and we'll discuss things like speed and power and everything else as it relates to sports and athletes, but I will say that in almost no sport, or in very, very few exceptions, do you ever move slowly. And notice I said move, I did not say isometric strength, where you're holding against something. We're talking about moving. Every single sport, again, with very few exceptions, and remember the exception doesn't create the rule, do you ever move slowly? So for athletics, you generally want to be as explosive and as fast as possible for overwhelming majority of sports. But let's go over to hypertrophy, because that's what most people care about first and foremost, and that includes even strength athletes. Right? Even those of us who are trying to get as strong as possible, you have to gain muscle. And when people say, well, I need to make a weight class, well, then you need to either get shorter, because weight classes are height classes in most strength sports, and that's understood. Plenty of coaches say that. Or you need to lose body fat. Right? You don't ever limit your muscle growth. And if you can magically grow more muscle, then will allow you to stay in your class, and you need to learn how to lose 5 pounds of fat, or you need to learn how to do a water cut, or whatever you need to do, and you'll still perform better. So I wouldn't worry about that. You always want to maximize muscle mass for a strength sport. So even you guys need to be paying attention to this. And for people who are chasing physique endeavors, you guys damn well better listen to this, because you guys have oftentimes weak points that you have to balance out. And the best way to balance out a weak point is to recruit as many muscle fibers as possible in it. And that's what makes you grow. So let's come over to the point. The more quickly you move a weight, the more muscle fibers are recruited. That is not subject to debate. That is not subject to controversy. That is not even a controversial statement. And even before the more recent studies done in the last few years, that was already understood in exercise physiology. Now you have the bodybuilding researchers, the people who care all about bodybuilding. Even they're performing studies now and acknowledging this fact. Right? Those who care about nothing more than hypertrophy, that is all they care about, are even acknowledging this fact. Moving a weight as explosively as possible under control recruits the most muscle fibers. Hands down. It beats the mind-muscle connection. It beats moving a weight slowly. It wins. It wins every single time. In every version of the studies we've ever done, whether you compare it to moving a weight slowly, whether you compare it to a mind-muscle connection and squeezing, lifting a weight quickly with compensatory acceleration, just flat out recruits more muscle fibers. Everyone acknowledges this. Study after study after study has confirmed it. And it makes sense. It makes sense because you have to generate more force. In other words, it used to be this silly concept in the bodybuilding world. This is why this is still a point of contention. You had guys like Mike Benzer would say, oh, it's momentum. It's outside force that's causing that. If you lift it really fast, you have to go slow. Well, what's creating that outside force? In other words, if you come down to your chest and touch it with a bench on a barbell, right, not bouncing it, right, but if you touch your chest, even for a brief pause, and you explode up as hard and as fast as you can, what's creating momentum? Your pectorals, the muscle fibers. Right? The muscle fibers. Now, arguably, does it get easier at the top because you accelerated it faster? Yes. But, you know, in strength athletes, that's one reason they'll mess with accommodating resistance sometimes, so that they can get around even that. And that even has its place, right? That even has its place for that reason. But you're also usually starting from the mechanical disadvantaged position. Where's the hardest part of a bench press? The first inch off the chest. Where's the hardest part of the squat? Usually the first couple inches out of the hole. Right? All of these exercises, big exercises, the majority of them, the hardest part is usually at the terminal end of the range of motion. That's where the muscles are under the most tension, due to the levers and moment arms and everything involved with your bones and everything. It puts them at the disadvantaged positions. They have to work the hardest. So if you can explode the hardest from there, you're actually recruiting more muscle fibers. You're recruiting more muscle fibers. And if people say, well, you know, it's not getting enough work or enough time under tension, we'll do more sets then, do more volume. Because time under tension, all that means is volume. That is a code word for volume. You need to do more work. The actual time The bar itself is in motion is largely irrelevant. That's not the factor, really. It really needs to be looked at as work done. All right, it doesn't mean you go slow, because if people are saying, oh, time under tension and go slow, well, that's been disproven in every single study that's ever looked at it. So that doesn't have any value. You're not recruiting more muscle fibers, you're recruiting less. So if you take 2 seconds to complete a rep that you could have completed in 1.5, you recruit less muscle fibers. The 2 second had more time under tension, but it did less muscle fiber recruitment, so it stimulated less growth. So there goes your stupid time under tension hypothesis. That gets thrown right out the window. Doesn't match human physiology. It's a bodybuilding myth. Unless it means to you, you need to do more reps, you need to do more sets. Doing 5 sets of bench press is more work than doing 4 sets. It has more time under tension. There you go. And the same can be said of the eccentrics. Slow eccentrics don't actually cause more muscle growth than fast eccentrics. All right? 1 second eccentrics give you a maximum eccentric load. You don't gain any more muscle, and any studies that looked at this 15 years ago found that a 4 second eccentric does not cause more hypertrophy than a 1 second eccentric with the same weight. It doesn't. What does cause less growth is if you just turn loose at the top and let it fall. So in other words, if you were to do an overhead press and drop it to the floor and then put it back up on the rack and then do another one, or you turn loose your deadlift at the top, you do get slightly less training stimulus and less growth. But it does let you do more reps. So if you end up doing more reps, it balances out and you get the same muscle growth. All right. So even then, it doesn't apply. It doesn't work. It is in your best interest to move a weight relatively quickly. You want to move a weight fast. You don't want to lift a weight slow, even if your goal is hypertrophy. Even if it's hypertrophy, no reason to do slow. No reason to do slow. And there's no reason to worry about squeezing, because again, that's the mind-muscle connection. What do the studies show? That actual velocity, that force generation trumps the mind-muscle connection. The mind-muscle connection actually works. Let's get that straight. That actually works in studies. It's just that compensatory acceleration works a hair better, slightly better. It still does a better job of what you're trying to do with the mind-muscle connection. So that's for hypertrophy purposes. And you strength athletes better be looking at hypertrophy. Let's make that very, very clear. A bigger muscle is a stronger muscle. Size equals strength, and you can only skew that at most about 10% without drugs. Drugs can bridge the gap. But if you're drug-free, that's it. So then we look at sports. Almost every sport you need to move fast. When you jump, when you sprint, when you turn on a field, and by the way, you guys did see the study I showed showing that squats actually beat one-legged exercises for the ability to change directions on field. That was studied. So let's not go there. But all of these things require speed. They require power. How do you develop that? By lifting a weight quickly. Now, we can argue that speed and power are largely genetic, and that's true. But you can reach your genetic potential through training, right? You can reach your genetic potential. That's kind of the point. You are going to be limited by genetics on speed strength, though. Let's be honest here. That is very genetically oriented. But you can make the most out of the genetics that you do have, whether they're good for it, bad for it, or phenomenal for it, and you're just one of those genetic freaks. You could still make the most of what you have. So it's important. Now, people will say, well, that's not true. There are sports that the exception. And what's the one that people bring up all the time? How about arm wrestling? Yeah, that's a good point. Good point. There are plenty of sports that have isometrics involved, particularly grappling type sports, right? Absolutely. And I don't think anyone's going to deny that. But here's the point I would make. Is moving slow going to help you with isometric strength? If moving fast produces better strength and size gains, you damn well need to be moving fast. Now, when it comes to isometrics, what do we know? That strength only carries over, what, about 15 degrees in joint angle specificity? So if you need isometric strength in a specific positions for your sport, then you need to do sport-specific work where you train those isometric positions isometrically. I mean, specificity of training, guys. If you have sport-specific isometric strength needs, the best thing you could possibly do is train those specific joint angles with isometrics. You don't need to be doing slow movements. So that's the counter argument people make this. Well, there are sports where you move slow. No, you don't move slow. You're stagnant. You have isometric strength. Well, then you need to train isometric strength. You wouldn't train to move slowly, because when you do push past that point of isometric, because that's what you do in arm wrestling, you probably want to push them over pretty damn fast. So you still need to be fast. You still need to be powerful. You just need to have strength, stamina, and isometrics at that joint angle to go with it, or multiple joint angles. And so you should train that. But that's sport-specific training. Everything else that you do should probably be fast. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.